It all started with a strange signal, series of clicks, hums, and fluctuating frequencies that left Earth's top scientists scratching their heads. The signals were faint but steady, coming from a nearby star system called Zephyr 9. This system, previously overlooked for its seeming lack of habitable worlds, became a focal point of research as readings confirmed an Earth-like atmosphere on a planet orbiting its primary star. This planet, christened Azura by scientists, was rocky and dense, shrouded in green and blue hues visible even from light years away. Initial scans revealed hints of oxygen, nitrogen, and a climate that could, in theory, support human life. Eager to investigate, Earth's International Space Program gathered resources to send an advanced probe, Odyssey, equipped with cameras, spectrometers, and a series of remote sensors that could scan for signs of life and civilization. It took months of travel, but finally, Odyssey entered orbit around Azura, relaying images and data back to Earth. The images were unsettling: dense jungles, sprawling mountains, and shadows of creatures of colossal size. But something was peculiar. There were no signs of structures, cities, or anything resembling civilization as humans knew it. The transmissions grew increasingly chaotic. Odyssey's footage became grainy and fragmented, showing glimpses of creatures that appeared to be part of the landscape itself. Gigantic, lumbering beings, covered in thick, reflective scales, moved with a slowness that belied their power. In one image, a creature stretched its jaws open, displaying rows of serrated teeth that could easily sever metal. Earth's scientists were torn between fascination and dread. These creatures didn't appear intelligent, at least, not in the way humanity understood intelligence. Yet they possessed a powerful, unsettling presence, as though they were aware of the probe watching them. There were reports of energy surges around the creatures, disrupting Odyssey's systems. It was as if the planet itself was pushing back against the intrusion. With the probe's systems in jeopardy and signals growing weaker, scientists knew they had one choice left. The mission was clear. Humans would go to Azura and see for themselves if it could be a new home or a deadly trap. The vessel, Discovery, touched down on Azura under a sky of swirling green clouds. The crew, led by Commander Avery Harper, comprised 5 highly trained astronauts and scientists, each chosen for their expertise in extraterrestrial environments and adaptability under extreme conditions. Harper, known for her calm demeanor and unyielding drive, was confident yet wary as she oversaw the landing. As the ship's thrusters cooled, the crew gathered their gear: scanners, oxygen masks, and weapons, should any unanticipated threats arise. Stepping onto the surface, they were struck by the silence. No wind stirred, no birds chirped, just an eerie, all-encompassing stillness. The ground beneath them was a mix of dark earth and unfamiliar green moss that clung to their boots with a slight stickiness. They were surrounded by towering trees with bark that gleamed metallically, their branches twisting into intricate, thorny patterns. It was a surreal, almost artificial forest, as though they had entered an alien painting. Dr. Malik, the mission's biologist, was the first to speak up. "There's a strange density to the air," he noted, watching his oxygen monitor flash at higher levels than expected. "Feels heavier. There's something else here." As they moved through the jungle, their sensors began to pick up faint energy reading spikes and pulses that seemed to come from all around them. At first, the crew thought it was natural electromagnetic interference from Azura's unique geology, but the pattern was too consistent, almost rhythmic. Harper ordered the team to stay close, her instincts on high alert. It wasn't long before they spotted one of the creatures. Looming in the shadow of a gigantic tree, it seemed to blend into the landscape, its massive, scaly back mimicking the tree's bark. The creature was enormous, nearly the height of a 2-story building, with thick, muscular limbs and scales that shifted colors as it moved, blending effortlessly with its surroundings. Dr. Young, their xenobiologist, couldn't contain her awe. "Camouflage on a biochemical level," she whispered, studying the shifting hues. "It's not just blending in, it's actively controlling its appearance." The creature watched them, unblinking. It stood still, almost like a statue, but the crew could feel a strange vibration emanating from it, a low, pulsating hum that reverberated through the ground. Commander Harper raised her hand, motioning for the team to back away slowly. But before they could retreat, the creature let out an ear-splitting roar, releasing a shockwave of energy that scrambled their equipment. Their communication devices crackled, and the lights on their scanners flickered and died. Panic surged through the crew as they realized they were stranded, their advanced technology rendered useless by the creature's natural defenses. Dr. Malik reached for his weapon, but Harper held him back. "No sudden moves," she hissed. "It's not attacking, it's warning us." They took a few cautious steps backward, heart rate spiking, while the creature maintained its stance, observing them with an almost disinterested gaze. After a tense standoff, it turned and lumbered away, disappearing into the dense foliage, as if it had never been there. "Commander," said Dr. Yang, her voice trembling, "it's as if it knows exactly how to disable our technology. Not just some random interference, there's intention behind it." Harper swallowed, her mind racing with implications. If these creatures, though seemingly primitive, could generate electromagnetic fields strong enough to disrupt human technology, colonizing Azura might be more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. "We're not alone here," Harper said, glancing over her shoulder at her team. "And if these creatures are aware of us, then we need to rethink everything about this mission." The crew of Discovery regrouped, setting up a small base camp near their landing site to assess the damage to their equipment. Their communication systems were in disarray, making contact with Earth impossible. Scanners were down, and only basic tools remained functional, leaving them vulnerable on this unpredictable world. Commander Harper gathered her team, her expression resolute despite the daunting circumstances. They were trained for survival, she reminded them, and they would have to rely on their instincts and what few resources they had left. As the night descended, the jungle came alive with strange sounds. Low, rumbling noises echoed from the depths of the trees, followed by vibrations that seemed to pulse through the ground. Despite their unsettling encounter earlier, Harper ordered the team to monitor the sounds and record them on handheld devices. Every so often, shadows moved in the forest, hinting at the presence of the creatures that had disabled their technology. Dr. Malik, unable to resist, ventured a few yards into the jungle to get a closer look. His footsteps were careful, his movements deliberate. In the dark, he could see the faint outlines of multiple creatures, each one blending seamlessly with the trees, their skin reflecting the shifting colors of the flora around them. He realized they weren't just camouflaged. They were adapting to the environment in real time, mirroring it with a precision that seemed to defy logic. One creature turned its massive head toward him, and Malik froze, staring into a pair of cold, glistening eyes that seemed to penetrate his very being. Without warning, the creature emitted a low-frequency hum, and Malik felt an intense buzzing in his head, like static building up. Stumbling backward, he barely made it back to camp before collapsing, clutching his temples. Dr. Young and Commander Harper rushed to his side, while the others stood on high alert, scanning the perimeter. "They have some kind of mental signal," Malik whispered, his face pale with shock. "It's like they're communicating with each other, and maybe with us." As the team regrouped, they realized these creatures were not only physically formidable but also exhibited behaviors that suggested a deeper, primal intelligence. The low-frequency hums, they concluded, were a form of communication, perhaps even a territorial warning. With heightened caution, the crew spent the next few hours observing the creatures from a distance. They noticed distinct behaviors. The creatures moved in small groups, almost like packs, and their interactions seemed purposeful. When one creature detected the humans, it would emit a pulsing vibration, signaling to others in the area. Within minutes, more would appear, their towering forms casting intimidating shadows over the landscape. Just when the team thought they were at a safe distance, an unsettling realization hit them. The creatures weren't just defending their territory, they were systematically driving the humans back to their landing site, forming a perimeter around them. As dawn broke, Commander Harper gathered her team, her mind racing. The creatures weren't traditionally intelligent, but they were powerful, coordinated, and seemed determined to contain the human presence. It was no longer a question of studying them, survival had become their top priority. The next morning, the team discovered that some of their gear, hastily abandoned when the creatures approached, was now missing. Harper ordered a search of the nearby area, hoping to recover the lost items. When Dr. Young and Malik reached a rocky clearing, they found the missing equipment shredded, bent, and scattered, as if inspected and discarded by the creatures. It was as if the aliens were studying the humans' belongings, breaking them apart with raw power and no understanding of their function, yet demonstrating curiosity. A loud, guttural roar echoed through the jungle, and the ground began to shake as another massive creature approached, larger than any they had yet encountered. Its body was covered in thick, reflective scales that seemed almost metallic, shimmering in the light. As it stomped closer, the team could feel a strange, magnetic pull force emanating from the creature that made their remaining electronic devices flicker and spark. The team watched in horror as the creature let out a piercing cry, releasing another electromagnetic pulse that temporarily paralyzed them. Commander Harper, her mind racing, struggled to keep her wits about her as she realized the creature's sound frequencies were disrupting not only their tech but their nervous systems. It was more than a warning. This was a demonstration of power, a sign that they were trespassing on territory they could neither comprehend nor control. When the effects wore off, Harper knew they had to change their approach. Conventional weapons and technology would be useless here, and their usual tactics were futile against creatures who could render their devices powerless. She ordered the team to fall back, avoiding further confrontation and relying on basic survival techniques. They fashioned makeshift tools from what they could scavenge, taking advantage of natural formations and hiding in dense foliage whenever they sensed the creatures drawing near. But it wasn't long before they discovered yet another chilling aspect of these creatures. They were learning. Every move the humans made, every attempt to hide or adapt, was quickly countered. The creatures' primal instincts allowed them to observe, understand, and adjust, becoming more adept at anticipating human actions. Their movements grew more precise, their coordination stronger. They began to surround the team at night, forcing them into smaller and smaller areas, isolating them with no means of escape. During one such night, Dr. Young whispered in awe, "It's like they're treating us as prey." Her eyes were wide, filled with fear and reluctant admiration. Not like they're hunting for food, but because we've crossed some invisible boundary they'll never let us leave. The team was now pinned in a confined area near their camp, surrounded by towering creatures who loomed in the shadows, waiting patiently, their presence an oppressive, silent threat. It became clear to the humans that these aliens had no interest in technological advancement. They didn't need it. Their brute strength, combined with an instinctual understanding of energy manipulation, made them forces of nature in their own right. "Commander," Dr. Malik said, breaking the tense silence, "if they can learn this fast and adapt like this, there's no way we'll ever be able to outsmart them on their own terrain." Commander Harper's face was grim as she looked at her team. "Then we're leaving," she said, her voice steady. "We're going to get out of here and make it back to Earth. And when we do, we're going to let everyone know. Azura is not a new home. It's a trap." Under the cover of darkness, the crew devised a plan to escape the containment area, using their last remaining resources to slip past the creatures. They moved carefully, knowing that one wrong step could lead to disaster. As they crept through the jungle, every rustle of leaves, every breath, every heartbeat was a reminder of the power surrounding them. The team's plan was simple but perilous. Without technology to guide them, they would have to rely on instinct, agility, and a little luck. Commander Harper led the way, moving swiftly through Azura's dense jungle under a thick veil of mist and darkness. The creatures were nearby, their faint, rhythmic hums reverberating through the ground. It was clear that they were closing in, adapting to each evasion strategy the humans attempted. The crew pushed forward, each step an exercise in stealth and caution, but their nerves were frayed from the constant threat of the creature's looming presence. Every now and then, Harper would signal them to halt, listening carefully for signs of movement. The creatures had a way of merging with their surroundings, their reflective scales allowing them to appear and disappear like shadows. It felt as though the jungle itself were alive, monitoring their every move, waiting for a single mistake. They reached the edge of a cliff overlooking a vast valley, where they could see their landing site in the distance. It was their only chance. Harper took a deep breath and motioned to the team to follow her down the narrow, rocky path. Just as they began their descent, a piercing roar shattered the silence, sending a wave of shock and dread through their bodies. The largest of the creatures, a monstrous being covered in scales that shimmered like molten metal, emerged from the forest behind them, its massive frame blocking their escape route. The creature let out a low, vibrating hum, sending ripples through the ground and causing their makeshift tools to tremble in their hands. The crew was trapped between the creature and the sheer drop below. Harper looked over the edge, her heart pounding. The fall was steep but survivable if they angled their descent carefully. She turned to her team, her eyes fierce and determined. "This is it. We're going over. Follow my lead." One by one, they climbed down the cliffside, gripping the jagged rocks and inching their way down, avoiding loose stones and sharp edges. But the creature was relentless, following them from above, sending out pulses that loosened rocks and made the cliff tremble. Just when they thought they were close enough to jump, the creature leaned over the cliff's edge and let out an ear-splitting cry, unleashing a final pulse of energy that dislodged a massive boulder. Harper barely had time to shout a warning before the boulder crashed down, narrowly missing them, but splintering the cliff face in the process. Dust and debris filled the air as the team leapt the remaining distance, landing hard but safely on the valley floor below. Their bodies ached, and exhaustion weighed heavily on them, but they were alive. With no time to waste, they ran toward their landing site, their movements fueled by a single, desperate hope of escape. The creature roared from above, and other figures appeared along the ridge, watching as the humans scrambled back to their ship. It was as if the creatures were letting them go, confident that they had learned a lesson. They had trespassed on sacred ground, and they were not welcome back. Once aboard Discovery, Harper and her team wasted no time powering up the engines and preparing for launch. Dr. Young worked feverishly to bypass the systems affected by the electromagnetic pulses, while Dr. Malik secured samples and data they had managed to gather during their ordeal. As the engines roared to life, the creatures gathered around the edges of the jungle, their eyes glinting in the dim light, observing the humans' final departure. As Discovery broke through Azura's atmosphere, a mixture of relief and sadness filled the crew. They had come with dreams of exploration and expansion, of finding a new home for humanity, yet they were leaving with something far different: a warning, a sobering truth. In the silence of space, Harper addressed her crew. "We've learned that some worlds don't need technology to defend themselves," she said. "They have their own ways, their own strengths that we don't understand and might never be able to match." Dr. Young nodded thoughtfully. It's like they were protecting something. Not just territory, but maybe a balance, a way of life that doesn't depend on what we think of as civilization. Harper sent a final transmission back to Earth. She summarized their findings and their decision. Azura, while habitable in theory, was far from a safe or suitable colony. It was a planet ruled by creatures of overwhelming strength, whose simple yet devastating abilities rendered human technology ineffective. They could communicate, defend, and adapt in ways that defied human understanding, and they held a territorial dominance that was both primal and profound. In her final report, Harper added a solemn message. "We may dream of other worlds, but not every world is meant to be inhabited." Azura is a planet that has no need for humans. It has its own guardians, its own balance, and some frontiers are best left undisturbed. As Discovery soared back toward Earth, the crew was left with the haunting knowledge that the universe was far wilder and more formidable than they had ever imagined. There were other worlds out there, but perhaps they would remain unexplored, untouched, a silent testament to the universe's boundless power and mystery.